All right, to start off, does anybody know who these guys are?
No.
So the guy that likes to hide on the left here is Johnny Russell from Ultimachine. So half the RepRaps, or maybe, I don't know, 90% are running his hardware. Next, we have Joe. I think that he goes without introduction. He is Superman. Next, we have Maxbots, creator of the Mendel Max and co-owner of Maker's Toolworks. And last but not least, we have Aeva from Lulzbot. All right, so who has a question?
This is for anybody. I've been watching the RepRap forum for about the last 6 months, and a group of people actually have developed the ramps for Do. And they didn't even get to iteration 2, and they had their Gerber files up on GitHub, and GTech came out with boards for $30. And I'm just wondering how you feel the economics of the huge Chinese manufacturing capacity has on open source stuff. Open source does not mean non-profit. How are these people ever going to recoup their development time if they can't even get one iteration of their board out before $30 boards are flooding the market?
So that's a good question. You don't have to price compete necessarily. You do not have to price compete with the China. A lot of our company makes the control boards for a lot of them. We design them and assemble them in Tennessee, but we really compete more on quality and support. We're really a support company. We build boards to support the customers, where the Chinese they just build to sell. So we can get a higher price than the Chinese, and we have to continue to develop. That's the real key to open source, is the speed of development and iteration. So those guys, they put out the first version and then they were cloned, but they were cloned with an incomplete version. The board that they were selling was full of flaws. It was just a prototype, and so yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a disincentive, but it doesn't negate the ease of development, right? If we work in secret, we don't get to develop the cool stuff in the first place, and that's what we do, is try to develop new stuff. So once we're done with the first one, we're trying to develop something else anyway. So we do have to recover our expenses, but we can do that. There's a lot of different types of customers out there. Some people do want a really inexpensive product, but some people do want to help support the original people. And so you don't have to sell to everybody. There's a huge population in the world now, and we couldn't possibly support everybody. So we're just really happy to be able to sell to the people we do. It's really not an issue for us.
Thanks, Johnny. Next question.
I've tried to get this addressed all weekend, and nobody seems willing to talk about it, and so I don't know if this is an addressable question. But I want to know your opinions on where we're going this year and next year in this open source 3D community. What's going to be possible, you think, realistically, and where we're headed? Please.
So I've been working on a 3D scanner, a free software 3D scanner, completely Libre hardware, DIY friendly, for Lulzbot, and the projected deadline release for that is sometime next year. So that's a answer of a thing that's coming up in the next year.
Okay, a good scanner.
Yeah, and the different, it's a novel approach. The result should be a printable STL file with minimal user intervention.
So I don't really have an answer for what's coming because it's all on the fly. There's really not a roadmap. There's just a lot of objectives, more or less. But there's a lot of things to work on, and so that's the beauty of RepRap and the open source, is that you get to choose the projects you work on. You can't necessarily choose what projects get done unless you do them yourself. So a lot of things like tool changing extruder, rotary axes, various materials. The materials are starting to be available with new blends, and there's countless polymers that can be mixed and used for this application. What else? I guess that's all I got.
So earlier today, somebody asked me, will we ever have a home metal 3D printer? And my response was, ever's a long time. Yes, we will eventually have 3D printers in our home. It may be 1,000 years from now, who knows. This year, I don't think there's going to be any major changes, but this community surprises me sometimes. So, you know, you see the things here, there's some pretty amazing things here, and this is a tiny fraction of the community. So we may have a home metal printer by the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised, but the short answer to your question is it's not an answerable question because, you know, none of us can see the future. And in this community, there's too many brilliant minds to really be able to say what's going to happen in the future. So. Well, we have a new printer coming out, a new evolution of the Mendel Max that should be out later this summer, and we're also looking at moving into some other areas outside of 3D printing. Maybe this year, maybe not. It's hard to say for sure what's coming, but there's, like I said, there's just so much to work on. Like Johnny said, there's so many projects that you can choose to work on. You know, any one company can only do so much, so it's a tough. You know, we're focused on the fused filament fabrication printing, and probably moving into some CNC machining, but beyond that, what the rest of the community will do is anybody's guess. So, Joe.
Okay, so in the next year or two, I would guess that the change which will, the thing which will change the most is the user experience, because, well, we have the hardware which is nice and works, we have the software which is nice and works, but we need to work on the user experience, so it's much more pleasant experience for newcomers to come to 3D printing and print what they want, and that's, I think, where we like the most nowadays. And I think there's a lot of people working on actually nice user experience with 3D printing.
I'd like to expand on that, which we need more software people in hardware. That I think is going to be where this swells, where projects are not in single or low double-digit contributors, but where we actually grow our community to broader than just the usual suspects so far.
Are you talking about like 3D development software?
Sure.
I agree.
Where do you want it to go? You know, here's a good thought for everybody here. Nobody here is like employed by RepRap, right? Nobody works for RepRap. all you got to do is get involved. What do you want to see it do? Let's see your projects and get active in the community. Look at Nick Seward back there. How was it, 10 months ago you said you started doing all those crazy designs? How many different iterations did you do in 10 months? And nobody saw any one of those coming, right? So that's a great example of how you yourself, if you have an idea that you think you want to do, just get involved. Do it. Next question. Anybody got something else?
Ready? All right. So within open source, there's a lot of projects that people aren't like very excited to do, but they're big and they're important. Let's say like slicing or some different things. How do you think, from a corporate perspective, as a company, how would you best incentivize those projects?
Do you mean specifically how do we incentivize the projects that are less glamorous than slicing, or?
Right. It's like just general infrastructure, you know, like updating RepRap wiki, GitHub, or something for hardware. I know there's like Kickstarter and there's all these different avenues for that. But I mean, what do you envision could be potential solutions to get the community more involved in open development?
I think usually what happens with open source software and free software is that pain points usually are the incentives for people to work on these things. About 2 years ago, I set out on a project to write slicing software, and I've written mostly infrastructure for printing because that's more of a pain point in the day-to-day of printing than slicing software is. As we say, a lot of development happens as scratching your own itch. And I think also what is attractive of a problem to work on is different from person to person. Slicing software is an interesting puzzle, but it's not necessarily a puzzle that's intuitive to most people. Whereas somewhere along the lines, people actually wrote cups as hard as to believe that there's anything human involved in cups. Like, you know, something like that's going to happen in 3D printing, even though that's not exactly the most glamorous or rewarding part of the pipeline. And a lot of times, some of the most satisfying things to create are also some of the most unsatisfying things to share. A lot of the things that are going to improve in the future are things where if it's working right, no one knows that you actually did it. But people come forward and do that. And I think that it's not so much that it's incentivized by corporations, but so much that this is a labor of love.
It's a great question, and as a relatively new company and as a startup, we've been pretty much scrambling just to fill our own needs and our own documentation and that stuff on our own level. It is an interesting question, and I don't know that I have a specific answer, but I do think that it's something that the community should talk about, and what needs to be done, and what can the companies in the community do to support the broader community. You know, we're not necessarily getting rich doing this, but we do want to give back. So, you know, talk to us and let us know what we can do, and what you think needs to be done. And I'm sure there are ways that we can help. So.
Just also to say that I think there's something that to get involved with something like that there's something fundamentally radical about the sort of person who wants to participate in free software or libre hardware. That for the most part, we're not just people who are incentivized easily by a little carrot. I mean, otherwise, you know, we'd go work for MakerBot.
So I have a question. I think a lot of newcomers to 3D printing have this question, and Johnny, you touched on this a bit. When do we get to functional mechanical parts in 3D printing?
You mean like the Stratasys crescent wrench that you print and it prints in one piece and has dissolvable support material, that sort of thing? while strong, I think our parts now are as good as anything that comes off of Stratasys, and at least on the relatively inexpensive Stratasys machines, our machines are arguably far superior because we can print multiple colors, not just white. We can print polycarbonate, we can print nylon, we can print PLA, we can print all these different materials, we can print flexible materials. These are things that you can't print on a $20,000 Stratasys. You can't print on a $30,000 Stratasys. You have to buy into their high-end line to get any kind of multiple material printers. And I'm not talking multiple materials at the same time. I'm just talking the ability to print other materials other than ABS. They do have the soluble support. Personally, I think the big roadblock there on the consumer level is just the chemicals involved and that it's not the most home-friendly process. There are people doing it now. It's possible. If you have a dual extruder printer, you can print dissolvable support material. It's just not the most user-friendly process yet. So that's coming. But like everything else here, it's just a matter, it's open source. It's a matter of somebody saying, I really want to do this, figuring out the process, and then it will bubble up into the community at large. So it's absolutely possible right now. So.
Well, there are tens. Hey, so there are tens of thousands of printers built out of printed parts, and they seem to run fine. So I would say that the mechanical properties of the parts are good enough, I would say.
Does that answer your question?
Next question.
Hey, so most people here that I see, you know, they've got the 3D printers, but for subtractive manufacturing, you know, my friend built a kind of a Shapeoko variant, and it seems like the software chain for that really isn't up to the same level and same, you know, usability that it is for 3D printing, you know, visualizing tool paths and choosing different tools and everything. Do you guys know of any projects or things that are going to help make that better? Because, you know, the tool chain for 3D printing, though sometimes you struggle with it, is pretty good, surprising with, you know, the fact that a lot of it is open source, people did on their own spare time, and is really impressive software, really. But you look at like the stuff for sending G-code to CNCs with that garble, and you're doing most of it with, you know, G-code commands. Do you guys see anything in the pipeline or know of anything that's interesting?
Tools available for CAM on machine tools are far superior to what we have. The difference is they're all commercial. So the reason why the tool chains are fairly good on 3D printing for free is because there was no other choice. You couldn't go out and buy a commercial tool for less than thousands of dollars to do 3D printing. So when the RepRap project came along, there was an obvious need to make open source tools, or it could have been commercial, but the nature of the open source, the RepRap project made the tools open source. For the CAM stuff, the machining, there are inexpensive, relatively inexpensive tools out there that are okay. So it's like Aeva was saying, the itch there isn't enough of an itch that people haven't gotten around to scratching it yet. There certainly is a need for better open source CAM tools, but it's a lot of work and it's hard to justify that time input when you can buy a $150 program that works pretty well. So.
I have a question about where you see, like, across the world where this is really picking up, because it's kind of interesting. We're from Ohio, and we've run into a bunch of people here who are also from Ohio, and so it's kind of interesting to see, you know, there's a movement on the internet where people are actually from, and you're from Europe, and so, but you said no one knows you there because it's not as big. So where are like the hot spots? Where is it really starting to pick up, and do you see it as a worldwide movement or more of sort of localized?
Good question.
Okay. Yeah, it's absolutely a worldwide movement. I can say from looking at our sales data at Lulzbot that majority of our customers are in the United States and Europe, in that order. But a lot of this tends to be, I think the hotspots around this tend to be around hackerspace culture.
We've been really surprised that since we started, our #1 country outside of the U.S., actually outside of the U.S. and Canada, by far our biggest country that we sell to is Australia. I don't know why that is, but they buy a ton of our printers. We sell it a lot to Europe. We sell some to Asia, a few to Africa, not many, but I think that's partially because our printer is a relatively high-end printer. I think probably the less expensive ones get sold there, I would assume, a lot more. But yeah, it's definitely a worldwide market and all over. You know, we've shipped to every continent but Antarctica. We had one customer who told us they were taking it to Antarctica, but I think they were kind of trying to get a deal. And so I think he was near Antarctica, but anyway. But yeah, they're all over. So.
Next question. Go ahead, Johnny.
I was just going to add that it's really distributed, and so the people here are seeing more American sales. Joseph, I'm sure, sees mostly Czech sales. The thing started in Europe and England, and so the manufacturers there have a lot of sales in their country, so it's really hard to chart it out globally because everybody's got their own region.
If I remember right, a lot of this movement that we have is due to, at least with the FDMs, some patents that expired 3, 4, 5 years ago, and I read that we're on the verge of some of the more industrial machines, like laser sintering. Some of those patents are going to be expiring soon here too. Would you guys envision that being an equal movement as far as some of those processes being put into people's basements and, you know, in a regular person's home?
Well, I don't think that we were too concerned about the patents, with what expired or what don't. Now, obviously, we are way more cautious because it's not just few people playing with printers at home, and there are companies springing out from the movement. But I mean, it's definitely important that these patents go out of. How to say it? Well, they are invalid or expired, but I don't think it's like, oh my God, it's going to expire in 1 month, then we will all work on it. But it's always another door open where we can go. I'm sure that somebody is working on SLS printers and stuff like that, so I just don't think it's like we are jumping right after it.
So, as far as like numbers of sales, I think that the filament extruders will probably be the dominating for a long time, just because of the safety factors. The current other offerings have stuff like more toxic chemicals, and the powders are dangerous in the laser sintering machine. So there's factors that will keep those out of the households. But we will see as the patents expire, I think we'll see a lot of businesses enter into those markets, but it'll be more for commercial and industrial use.
There's so much to be done right now with what we're working on here and what's commonplace in the RepRap community. I think that largely the present company is mostly working on things that they can do now, and our foreseeable future is to continue working on, building on those things and expanding on those things. That said, I do know of people, groups of people who do work on some more exotic printing technologies that are and their projects are not widely publicized because of reasons of concerns about patent infringement. And the problem right now, I think mostly what that means is that just pushes the development into other countries where that's not as much of a concern. I know of a startup that was going on in Chicago for a while that decided to move their operation entirely to China so that they could do some kind of SLA printer thing. So I think that kind of is my answer.
Wow. Couple quick questions. How did you get started with open hardware, open software, and/or 3D printing? And follow-up question: how can somebody new best contribute to this?
What was the last part of the question?
Yeah, what was the last question? How can somebody new best contribute back to this community?
I have to answer the first one. I think that was the second one.
Well, I just got started by doing it. I mean, I came across the RepRap project. I'd done some other tinkering and was active on some maker forums and such, but when I came across the RepRap project, that was the first real project that I contributed to. And I just got started by thinking this is really cool and getting involved, building a printer and going from there. As far as how somebody can contribute, that's such a broad question. It's hard to give a direct answer to, but figure out what interests you, what you're good at, what your skill set is. Everybody can help with documentation. Everybody can help by editing the wiki. You don't have to be even a good writer. There's stuff that is wrong. The wiki, the RepRap wiki is full of bad information. So find something that you know is wrong and fix it. That would be this easy thing that anybody can do. If you're a decent writer, go through and edit it. You know, find errors. Documentation, tutorials, that sort of thing. If you're a programmer, the user interface is terrible, you know, honestly. We need help with that. There's lots of stuff. Whatever you're good at, just do it. And if not, just hang out on the IRC channel or the forum and help other people when you can. Just, you know, even if you don't know much, you know more than somebody else. If you've been here a week, you've learned things that the newbies don't know. So that's something you can help out with. So.
Okay, it's on? My answer to the first question, I was a starving college student. I was reading about the RepRap project, I think in 2006. And I was inspired to try some things on a budget, mostly slicing experiments and inkjet printing and transferring patterns onto styrofoam sheets. And then that sort of spiraled into this long vortex of obsession and madness. And somewhere in there was a RepRap build project in a hackerspace, and now I'm at a 3D printing company. I think the best way to get involved is if you have ideas, even if they seem a little out there or crazy or run against the grain, I'd say run with them. I think some of the most interesting things that have happened here are also are not always the most obvious things to happen. And that said, if you are in absence of I guess the madness spark, in that respect, but are talented in other ways, and see that there's things that we are lacking in, or that there's software that you think that there would be a better feature to add to, or like don't hesitate and think, oh, I'm not smart enough to do work on slicing software, or other people are probably working on infrastructure. I'd just be getting in their way. Like, just, you know, go talk to people, look at the source code, and try to add things. And I think the results are surprising. But I think definitely the best way to contribute right now is to contribute in the domain of software.
Next question.
Well, I was talking about that in my previous talk, but I get to the project similar as Maxbots just a bit earlier, and I just found it and I liked it, so I started working on it. I mean, there's no magic in it.
yeah, I'm not sure how my time frame compares to these other guys, but I bought a MakerBot. Thank you, Zach. And I found things that I didn't like about it, and I just started trying to fix them for myself, and then I shared it with people out there, and they told me what I was doing right or wrong, and just iterated over and over again. And so I really agree with these guys to find something. If you've got something you're good at that you say you want to fix, just jump in there and try to fix it. I'd probably add, sort of like Aeva, that even if you're not good at it, you can still, if you're interested, just try it. If you see something you don't like, try the change and see if it's an improvement, and then just share it and communicate with other people in the community. And if it works for you, you'll be hooked.
One quick comment also, if you're not a programmer and you think you might be interested in learning it, things like the firmware or some of the slicing tools and such, they're all open source. So you can download it and play with it on your own computer and on your own printer, and if it doesn't work, you haven't really done any harm, because you can always flash back to the stock firmware. So you can only do good, you know, and it's a great way to learn what you're doing and go from there. And so you don't need to be an expert. And if you make a change that you think other people would benefit from, you can push it back into the official, and the developers will look at it and say, this is good, this is not good, whatever. And they will actually, so it's not like if you push a change into the official build, it's not like you're going to break anything, because it goes through a moderation stage. So it's a great way to help, and it's a great way to learn how to program too. So.
Okay, how about now? Next question.
Do you think we will really realistically be able to indefinitely fend off commercial efforts to lock down 3D printing, like DRM in STLs and chipping filament?
They can pee in their own pool if they want to, but we don't have to use their stuff.
We'll be able to actually keep up with the commercial interests, such that, Joe's talking about improving the user experience. If they beat us to that tipping point, can we fend off efforts to lock it down?
I don't see what they can do realistically, because short of passing laws that say any 3D printer has to have, whatever in it, and I don't think that's realistic. I don't think they would be able to pass those laws. Maybe I'm an optimist, but I really don't think they would be able to lock them down that far. I don't see any way they could do it. So even if HP comes out with a printer that has this, and they team up with MakerBot and Thingiverse, and every STL on Thingiverse is suddenly locked down, that doesn't prevent another site like Thingiverse from starting up that doesn't have those restrictions, where you can share open STLs. And in the end, they can only do so much. MakerBot actually couldn't do what I just said, because they don't own the copyright to any of those STLs. I own the copyright to my STLs that I've uploaded to Thingiverse. I've given them rights to use them, but I didn't give them rights to modify the files to add DRM. They couldn't legally do that. So anything that's up there now, they couldn't change. They couldn't lock down. If they tried to do a change like that, all they would do is make Thingiverse obsolete overnight, because nobody, right now there's already a lot of backlash against it and people trying to build other sites, and I guarantee you that would actually be the final nail in the coffin that would drive them away, drive people away. So yeah, I don't see that as a threat. I really don't, short of legislation, and I don't think legislation would ever happen. So. And if it did, it would only affect the U.S., and that's part of why I don't think it would happen, because it would just drive the 3D printing industry completely out of the U.S., which would hurt our economy more than any possible gain that there would be. So.
I think adding DRM into slicing software sounds like an incredible nightmare, and is probably also not within the best interests of commercial ventures either.
Well, You said about the tipping point. If they go around the tipping point because they beat us, for example, in the user interface, well, there's not much we can do about it. If suddenly 99% of the printers would have chipped ABS cartridges, whatever, and used DRM, then there's not much we can do. But I don't think we should be too concentrated on fighting them. We should just concentrate more on making the stuff we do better, and hopefully it will work out.
Yeah, I think the cat's already out of the bag. So in modern times, like the previous equipment that I compared to this is like inkjet printers. So inkjet printers, the chip came first, right? It was already decided that it would only be able to work with their specific ink. In our case, the openness came first. So they're not going to be able to put us back in the cage at this point.
So, yeah, and this is actually related both to what Joe and Johnny just said. If we do reach a tipping point, say again, HP comes out with a 3D printer and they saturate the market, they release it for $199 and everybody buys them, that would certainly hurt my business, but it wouldn't put me out of business. It wouldn't make me stop selling the printers, because I sell to a niche market. I sell to makers. I sell to people who want to tinker with the printers, and HP won't. They will lock down their printers, and they won't. It won't be user friendly, or it'll be user friendly. It won't be hacker friendly. And that's fine. And I mean, obviously, I'm not looking forward to that day because it will hurt my business, but it won't put me out of business, and I'll just deal with it. And you know, it won't change anything that I do, really. So I don't see it as a problem.
Copyleft is a feature, not a bug.
So what you just said was really, really good, because I get asked a lot what I will do when, as you said, HP will come with $199 printer. I'm like, I will be fine, because we can do whatever we want. If they do 199 printer, it will be just a small printer which would print 1 or 2 materials, and we are really good in adapting to new stuff. So we would be just selling specialized printers for special materials and stuff like that. So I think we are quite, what's the word, flexible and agile.
I was curious if you guys had any recommendations for open source CAD programs that aren't OpenSCAD. I'm a CAD modeler. I'm not a programmer. So, somebody like me who...
See, that's because you want to bash OpenSCAD.
I'm not bashing OpenSCAD. It's just not my intuitive program. I have a strong background in parametric 3D CAD, so walking into something like OpenSCAD is very daunting to me. But I don't want to have to use something like Pro-E to create a model to run on my open source printer. So I was curious if you guys had any recommendations for 3D modeling programs.
I'm sad to say it, but I don't think there is a good graphical 3D CAD open source program. There's FreeCAD, which is okay. It's getting better very slowly. I haven't used it for a while, so maybe it's gotten a lot better, and it might be good at this point. It's certainly worth checking out. There's HeeksCAD, which I have never really used, but there's a few of them out there. None of them seem to be great. If you're coming from SolidWorks or something like that, you're going to be disappointed. There are a number of good free but not open source CAD tools. The one that I'm hearing the best reviews of lately is a program called DesignSpark Mechanical. It's a pretty powerful program. It can only export STLs. It is closed down. But you know, for what you get, for what you pay for it, it seems pretty good. I know I'm not an open source zealot. I'm an open source fan, but not a zealot. So I may be the odd man out up here to recommend that. I completely understand where you're coming from. I use SolidWorks because I use it every day and I need to get things done. I can't use it, OpenSCAD or OSCAD. No matter what I want to do, I can't. It doesn't fit. My brain doesn't work that way either. So I love it. I think it's a great tool, but I can't use it.
So last year I've been here, the guys from CMCNC tried to teach me the SolidWorks. And it's so freaking hard. I mean, why would somebody switch from OpenSCAD to SolidWorks if SolidWorks is so hard? So, most definitely use OpenSCAD. And if you want, actually, you can export the objects in CSG and import them into FreeCAD and get even the topology of the part and all the structure in it. So you can modify it with your mouse if you prefer to. Okay.
I was going to not suggest this, but then you said program for modeling and thus broadening it beyond just CAD programs. But I absolutely love Blender. So I use that for, I got a mix of woohoos and groans. But Blender, people who like Blender really love Blender, and you can do some amazing things in Blender. And it has 3D modeling tools. So it's, you can debug meshes and things specifically for 3D modeling, or 3D printing.